President Muhammadu Buhari has relieved 2 ministers of their appointments. They are the Minister of Agriculture, Mohammed Sabo Nanono, and his power counterpart, Engineer Saleh Maman. Announcing their sack on behalf of the President, Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Femi Adesina, says the Minister of Environment, Mohammed Abubakar, has been redeployed to the Ministry of Agriculture, while the Minister of State for Works, Engineer Abubakar Aliyu, is to take over as Minister of Power. The presidency says it will soon fill the vacancies in line with constitutional provisions.
Change is the only factor that is constant in every human endeavor. And as this administration approaches its critical phase in the second term, I have found it essential to reinvigorate this cabinet in a manner that will deepen its capacity to consolidate legacy achievements. Accordingly, a few changes marking the beginning of a continuous process have been approved. They are as follows. Ministers leaving the cabinet. 1. Mohammed Sabo Nanono, Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development. And 2. Engineer Saleh Maman, Minister of Power. Redeployment. 1. Dr. Muhammad Mahmoud Abubakar, Minister of Environment, to assume office as the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development. 2. Engineer Abubakar D. Aliyu, Minister of State, Works and Housing, assumes office as the Minister of Power. In due course, substantive nominations will be made to fill the consequential vacancies in accordance with the requirements of the Constitution.
All right, Tundu, let's talk about this 6 years after.
I'm just wondering, what exactly does it take to get sacked from President Muhammadu Buhari's cabinet? Because I think it must take quite a bit. You really have to be completely beyond falling asleep on duty. You must have been comatose on duty because literally he does not like to sack people. He's so averse to it. So that performance must have been woeful by his estimation for him to make this decision, and that really does say a lot. I mean, no offense to the gentlemen who have been relieved of their duties. I'm sure they're better suited elsewhere, but it speaks volumes. I recall, I hate to say it, first impressions count.
Yeah.
Saleh Maman, when he was first appointed as Minister of Power, the first public statement he was quoted as making when he went to the ministry was asking Nigerians for prayers. That didn't inspire a lot of confidence. Personally, I'm sure he meant it in the best possible way, but that's not what you say coming out of the gate. As for Mr. Nanono, what I'll remember is him saying 30 naira is enough to get a good meal in Kano. I doubt that that's true. Maybe 30 naira can get you a tom-tom at this point, and that's about it. I mean, what's he talking about? He made some really ill-advised comments in that same conference. It was the 2019 World Food Conference. He looked around the room saying, what are people talking about? There's no hunger in Nigeria. What I can see here is more like obesity. That joke, for me, went down like a lead balloon. And then, of course, we cannot forget the 30 million naira allocated to a mosque for herders. All of these were most unfortunate. So maybe this has something to do with what has happened. But yes, they've been replaced, they're interim appointees, but the president is going to have to go back to the constitutional requirements because Mr. Nanono is from Kano State and Mr. Maman is from Taraba State, and they have to be replaced with people from their state. We go back to this issue of merits versus federal character, and I'm sure that's going to be discussed. But it just goes to show, I think President Buhari, now in exactly 634 days left to May 29, 2023, when his administration is officially over, is really thinking about his legacy, which he should have started to do, obviously, from day one. But I think now there's a sense of urgency. You'll recall recently he was saying he doesn't want to be a failure. So if I was a minister in his cabinet right now, I'd be very nervous.
Dr. Bati?
Well, I do not think that the two gentlemen who have been relieved of their positions will be missed in terms of those positions that they occupy. On many occasions on this program, we've been saying that there are ministers in this government who are unknown, who are invisible, and who seem to have been on a very long holiday. That, look, if you want to count the actual performance that the government is putting forward and that the people can engage with in terms of not just their visibility, but also the effort that they have demonstrated to show impact, there will be very few indeed. I do not want to put anybody on the spot by mentioning some names. But for the most part, most of them are just there as if they are on vacation. And it's good that after 6 years, the president has been able to identify just 2. Now, no. I once complained about this minister of, they are now gone Minister of Agriculture, that the bulk of the work that he should do, that his ministry should be doing, it was the CBN that was doing it, trying to fill the gap in terms of agriculture, the importance of agriculture. And then you have a Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, whose ministry at the time was not even aware that some advisor somewhere in the corridors of power was compiling a virtual registration and e-registration of farmers in Nigeria, and the ministry was not aware of this. So enough of it. I think that Alhaji Nanono, should just go quietly to go and enjoy his retirement, and he will have enough time to enjoy vacation. As for the Minister of Power, Saleh Mahman, well, you know that the Ministry of Power had also always been in the eye of the storm. But since Babatunde Fashola, SAN, now the Minister of Works left that particular ministry as one of those portfolios that he combined, there hasn't been much at the ministerial level, in terms of what we've been doing in the power sector. However, I think this is too little, too late. There are more persons within that cabinet that should be relieved of their assignment, if indeed part of the objective is to reinvigorate the cabinet, which is a phrase that was used by Femi Adesina in the copy that he read out. There are so many of them. Again, it's not for me to name names because ministers serve at the pleasure of the president. The Constitution gives him the powers to hire and fire. The only thing that is required to do is to respect the principle of federal character. He can choose anybody as his minister. But at the end of the day, the buck stops at his desk. The performance or the non-performance of the ministers will reflect on him. Now, one other reason we're told why these 2 ministers have been relieved of their assignments is that the president wants to develop the capacity to consolidate the legacy of his administration. Well, it's important for a leader to define, to put a fence around his legacy. They're removing 2, sleepy ministers, will probably not be enough. If there is a need for reinvigoration within the short period that is left or for the administration, I think more people will have to go. The question, however, why I said too little, too late, is that, look, these ministers, each one of them has spent about 6 years in government. They should have been relieved of their positions long ago. Because first term of a president in office or a governor in office, yes, the governor or the president may have a number of IOUs. You need to satisfy certain constituencies, pander to certain interests, deliver on IOUs. But after your first term in office, no, you don't need to worry too much about IOUs anymore. You need a cabinet that can perform and that is very nimble on its feet. So I think, now saying that the reform of the cabinet will be a continuous process, there isn't much time left. Before this time next year, Nigeria will be in a very serious election mode. The government itself will be more or less lame duck. So there will be very little, that any new minister, can do. There's very little magic that anybody at this, twilight moments of the administration can perform. So then we're told that there is a tradition of assessing projects and all that. Well, I'm not sure, whether there is concrete evidence as to that tradition. Mm-hmm. And if there is concrete evidence, this should be made available as part of building the legacy, at a ministerial level. And also the president should further look at departments and agencies. Mm. Because if the ministers, whether they are left in their positions or not, they will get involved in politics one way or the other. But the departments and agencies, those are areas in which some difference can still be made. But as to the construction of legacy, I think that's important.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Batiantunu, for that. That's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll have Rotus, Michael Wilson, and Emmanuel Afeni to give us updates on Africa, global business, and news headlines around the globe. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Our dependable Rotus Adiri is here to give us an African business update. Over to you, Rotus.
Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning,
Morning.
Doctor. Good morning to all our viewers. Yeah, look, just to continue along the conversation, the headlines today, the dismissal of the ministers of agriculture and power, respectively. Let's just got to look at impacts. So there's a chart. Let's put up this chart here and look at Nigeria's agriculture GDP under Minister Nanono. He was appointed, of course, in the third quarter of 2019. So the chart starts from the fourth quarter of 2019. You see GDP growth for agriculture was at 2.31%, and it just declined from then. Q4 2019, 2.31%. Q1 2020 down to 2.2. Q2 2020 down to 1.5, and then Q3 2020 1.39. In fact, the agricultural outputs GDP in the third quarter of 2020 was the lowest we had seen until this most recent quarter in Q2 2021, where it fell to 1.3%. But you'll see that it did climb, which was the highest output under his tenure, at 3.42% in the fourth quarter of 2020. And then another precipitous decline again, 2.28% in the first quarter of 2021, and then 1.3%. Another thing that doctors mentioned this area, let's look at inflation, food inflation in particular, a year into his tenure. From August of 2020, from 16.8%, you can see it accelerates all the way to 22.95% in March of 2021. And then it's decelerated a bit to where July 2021, you are 21.03%. And we're expecting August inflation figures, I think a week or so from now, under our new head of the Statistics Bureau. So look, you have to ask yourself, what in terms of output, in terms of benefits, has the agriculture sector received under the tenure of this now former minister? We know the central bank has done the Anchor Borrowers program for farmers and so on and so forth, but that's monetary, that's financing. After the Anchor Borrowers program has made gains, but you've given money to the farmers to be able to have access to get their crops out. But then, what does the Ministry of Agriculture now do in terms of boosting harvest for them, in terms of supply or rather storage facilities for those farmers, in terms of getting them to market? There's also the security issue. So what have we gained is the question. Then you go to power under Engineer Maman. What's been Salih Maman? What's been the gain there? With the grid continues to collapse. The outputs, 4,003 megawatts. There hasn't really been anything that one can point to. So overall, if you just ask yourself the question, what has been the ministerial impact? It's raining outside right now, right? It's raining pretty heavily. In fact, I have to give a shout out to a very nice good Samaritan who gave me a ride to the studio. What happens when it rains in this country? There's a bad drainage issue. Who does that fall under, right? It's works. Right? Of course, remember that the former Minister of Works and Housing had power, but it was disaggregated. We have to step back and ask ourselves, what is the ministerial impact on the Nigerian economy? Transportation. Are less Nigerians driving due to improvements in transportation? Have transportation costs come down? What has been the improvement in transportation infrastructure? Pick a ministry of Women Affairs. Are more women getting jobs? Has the education or attainment for women improved under the Ministry of Women Affairs? Works and housing. Nigeria's housing deficits, we've been touting this 17 million unit deficit now for about 3 or 4 years. Surely that number has grown. So, 2 years into, or rather with 2 years to go under the administration, which I understand from the language of the press release that was put out yesterday, there might actually be more of these changes down the line. But again, you've got, even the president himself is the Minister of Petroleum. Outside of the Petroleum Industry Act being signed, what have we gained in terms of petroleum? Is it subsidies? So and again, remember, you've got a Minister of State, and then you've got the actual, Minister of State in addition to these ministerial positions. So, I don't know. Overall, Nigerians have to ask themselves the question in terms of productivity, what we've gained. Oil and gas, very quickly. Eni, the Italian oil and gas company, made a major oil reserve discovery offshore in Ivory Coast. They're saying anywhere from 1.5 to 2 billion barrels of oil could be there. They're going to go into exploration. Of course, there's the whole debate over fossil fuels and the pressure on oil and gas companies to, move away from fossil fuels. But it's a big discovery, and they're going to actually go in as far as exploration to see exactly what they can get out from there. And that's our update for today.
Rotus, they're definitely going to tap into it. Good for Eni. Italian company there, they're going to tap into it. Ivory Coast is a great market for them. When you look at what is happening across in a country like Nigeria, where you have problems of insecurity, it's quite difficult to get the oil out. Yeah, oil is supposed to be good. Bonny Light is sweet crude, like they say, low sulfur content, easy to refine and the likes. But there are many problems associated with it. There's insecurity, there are risks here and there. Let's see how Eni is going to fight that out. But if they made that discovery, they should get it. Other companies have invested in Ivory Coast a lot. Total built a refinery there in the 60s in Ivory Coast. I think that's only the refinery they've got there in Abidjan. And let's see how that pans out. But one thing is certain, yes, it's the beginning of the end of oil. But is oil going anytime soon? Not really. Right. If for anything, the developing nations of the world will still use oil for the next 20, 30 years. Concerning these ministers, so I think we get it wrong. Great questions you've asked. And let me answer your question, Rotus. There will be no ministerial impacts, as regards all of these sectors, because we get it wrong in the first place. Even in the selection process, but we were talking about IOUs, we could call them spoilsmen. That used to be the case before, political favors, to the thing of federal character, not competence. That's another factor. But I think there's a model we can learn from. In Singapore, there are targets set for ministers, and if you beat those targets, there are bonuses. So it's like a workplace scheme that you meet your target as a minister, you surpass your target, you get bonuses for it. So it's run pretty much like a company. And except you have those targets in place for these ministers and you empower them, a lot more will not be done. But the truth is, what are the targets in place? I mean, what is even the merit threshold for he has done a good job? Who reevaluates those things? What is the clear-cut agenda for every ministry? What is the target? What do they discuss in the Federal Executive Council meeting as regards target for the ministers? And what are the incentives to drive them? So if you don't have all of that in place, then Rotus, it will just be like another case of somebody spending 5.6 billion on the stadium yesterday that everybody forgot to put a drainage in that was waterlogged when they played a match yesterday.
Sports, the Ministry of Youth and Sports.
And that's another Ministry of Youth and Sports. And you'll be wondering what is happening in the country. So we don't always get it right. We make the mistakes along the way, and now we expect them to do magic. They cannot do magic.
Well, if I may play the devil's advocate, yes, earlier on I made the point that these positions are given out for elite political settlement reasons, an attempt, to take care of the boys, job for the boys. But our conclusion is that ministerial appointments in Nigeria should not be job for the boys and the girls. It should be an opportunity to put into positions change agents who can make a difference, who can deliver the dividends of democracy, and who the people can look up to as leaders. But that has not been the case for a very long time in this country. However, I said I was going to play the devil's advocate. In 2019, the Buhari administration, the president specifically, said that key performance indicators should be set for, MDAs, and that the government will be reviewing those KPIs on a monthly basis. So, that evaluation, the question we can raise is, at what point did the federal government start evaluating the performance of those ministries, departments, and agencies for government to be able to arrive at a point that it will identify these two ministers that have been turned adrift? But I think that, setting KPIs for ministers, for heads of departments and agencies should be the priority rather than politics. And, in some other countries, in Bangladesh, in Singapore, which Rufai referred to, Look, the best and the brightest are the ones that are brought together to come and serve, not, political war horses or, persons with ethnic or religious affiliation. Look at the cabinet of Japan. Look at the cabinet in China. You have people who are properly educated, people who know their onions. One of the things we need to do in Nigeria going forward is to say, look, we don't want people just going around with Agbada or Babariga or whatever. We need people who have progressive thinking, who have ideas in their heads, and whose ideas are progressive and modern and useful and can make a difference. So those KPIs were put in place by the Buhari administration. But my key argument is that ministers should have been changed before now. This is not a case of reshuffling the cabinet. This is just a case of redeployment. It does not go far enough.
Rotus, you raised such great points, and I have my own rhetorical question to pose. What on earth is the point of them, the lot of them? The cabinet of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, I'm sorry at this point. And it happens all over the world. My particular favorite, to use that word loosely, was Betsy DeVos, who was Minister of Education under President Trump. A woefully mismatched candidate for that job, but she got it because she gave a lot of money to his campaign. It happened, and it should not. And here is my chance, which I never missed, to advocate for a parliamentary system of government in Nigeria. I watched with delight Dominic Raab get dragged over hot coals by his fellow MPs, even within his own party. It did not matter. It's all about service to the people. He had to face a grilling by his fellow MPs, the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, over his, his appalling behavior with regards to Afghanistan. This is what we want to see, which leads me to our National Assembly and their oversight function. It extends beyond going through line items in the budget. They have to hold the feet of ministers to the fire. That is their job. And it also starts with the nomination process, the screening process, where they're sent by the president to the Senate for approval without any idea of what portfolio that they'll be serving under. So the questions are not targeted. You also get the bow and go. It's all just ineffective all around, and it has to be reviewed.
Indeed.
And hope they don't get to tell us off your mic, off your mic.
Well, thank you very much, Rotus.
Thank you.
We'll see you again tomorrow morning.